The sun was setting on a quiet, seemingly insignificant planet, Earth. In the silence of the final hours, the world's last defense force braced themselves for what seemed like an inevitable end. Alex Hunter, a battle-worn captain, stood on the edge of what remained of the city of New York, staring at the skies, watching for the flash of incoming fire. The Synthar were coming. Their advanced, eye-driven fleet was heading for Earth with one goal: total annihilation. For months, humanity had fought back, but the odds were too great. Major cities had already fallen to orbital bombardment, and now only a handful of human soldiers, scattered across the globe, remained to make their last stand. Alex wasn't ready to give up. He had led countless missions, seen friends fall in battle, and watched entire cities crumble under the might of the Synthar. Yet there was one mission left, one final hope. A virus had been designed, one that could infiltrate the Synthar mothership and disable their central AI. If the virus worked, it could buy humanity enough time to turn the tide of the war. If it didn't, well, humanity would be lost, and Earth would be nothing more than a memory. Clad in black combat armor, Alex and his small team of soldiers made their way to the rendezvous point. The mission was clear: plant the virus, get out, and hope for the best. The Synthar didn't leave much room for error. As they moved deeper into the ruined city, the faint hum of cloaking devices flickered in the distance, indicating that enemy units were nearby. Every corner they turned, every step they took, felt like it could be their last. Suddenly, an explosion erupted, sending Alex and his soldiers tumbling to the ground. He barely managed to roll to his feet as the sound of a ship's engines filled the air. The Synthar were here. He saw the outline of their ship, massive, sleek, and impossibly fast. It hovered above them, its cloaked form turning visible just in time for the ground beneath them to explode into a hail of fire and debris. "Move," Alex shouted, grabbing the nearest soldier and pulling him behind the cover of a ruined building. His heart raced as his eyes scanned the chaos around him. The Synthar were relentless, their assault team appearing in perfect synchrony. These weren't just soldiers. They were the result of millions of years of AI evolution. Soldiers that fought with cold precision, without hesitation or fear. "Get to the rendezvous point. I'll cover you," Alex barked, voice hoarse, as he drew his plasma rifle. His team had been caught off guard, but they weren't dead yet. He wouldn't let them be. His mind raced as he took in the situation. He knew the Synthar's tactics. They wouldn't let them escape. They needed to fight back. The soldiers fought with everything they had. Alex fired his plasma rifle, taking down 2 Synthar soldiers as they advanced. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated, but the Synthar were relentless. They adapted, learning from every mistake. Alex's team fell one by one. He was alone now, with no one left to fight beside him. The mission had failed, but there was no time to mourn. He needed to make it to the mothership. As Alex sprinted through the wreckage, the Synthar's presence felt like a weight pressing on his chest. The world around him was filled with death, and yet he kept pushing forward, his mind focused on the task at hand. Every step was heavy, but he couldn't afford to stop. His people's survival rested on this moment. The virus, the key to humanity's future, was still intact. He rounded a corner and found himself facing the towering form of the Synthar flagship, its cold metallic exterior glowing in the twilight. But just as he prepared to breach the ship's defenses, a new figure appeared, a blur in the dark, darting between the shadows. Alex barely had time to register what was happening when a flash of blue energy cut through the air, taking down 2 Synthar soldiers with ease. His heart skipped a beat. Out of the shadows stepped a figure he couldn't have possibly expected. It wasn't human. She was tall, with glowing purple skin and striking features. Her eyes shone with an intensity that was both beautiful and dangerous. She looked at Alex, her gaze filled with determination. "Get inside, now," she said, her voice strong yet calm. There was no fear in her eyes, just a silent command, an unspoken promise that she was here to protect him. "What? Who are you?" Alex asked, still trying to process the situation. "No time for questions," she replied, her voice firm. "You'll understand later. I'm getting you to safety." Without waiting for a response, she turned and motioned for him to follow. As they made their way toward the mothership, Alex couldn't help but stare at her. Who was she? And why was she helping him? She seemed to be a warrior, moving with fluid grace, as if she had trained her whole life for moments like this. And yet, she wasn't human. Before he could ask another question, the Synthar soldiers that had been pursuing him regrouped. They charged forward, weapons raised, prepared to finish the job. Alex prepared to fight once more, but the alien woman held up her hand, signaling him to stay back. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she unleashed a devastating energy blast, disintegrating the approaching soldiers in an instant. She was powerful, more powerful than anything Alex had ever seen. Her abilities were unlike anything his people could even dream of. "Come on," she said, her tone still urgent. "We need to move." Alex followed, still in shock from what he had just witnessed. They made their way into the Synthar mothership undetected, a feat that should have been impossible. But somehow, this alien warrior, who had just saved his life, was leading him through the chaos with ease. As they entered the ship's interior, the air was thick with tension. Every moment felt like a countdown. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Alex knew he didn't have much time. The enemy was too powerful. And yet, somehow, there was hope now. But the real question remained. Why was this alien helping him? And what did she mean by safety? Was this a trap, or was this the beginning of something much bigger? There was only one way to find out, and Alex was ready to face whatever came next. Alex followed the alien warrior as she led him through the labyrinthine corridors of the Synthar mothership. His mind was racing, questions flooding his thoughts. Who was she? Why had she saved him? What did she mean by getting him to safety? He didn't have answers, but he couldn't afford to waste time asking. Every moment spent in the heart of enemy territory brought him closer to his death. Yet, with her by his side, a strange sense of hope began to flicker within him. They moved swiftly, her footsteps barely making a sound on the cold metallic floors of the ship. Alex's boots clanged louder in comparison, a constant reminder that he was human, just one man against the vast power of the Synthar. But this woman, this alien, was different. She moved with an ease and confidence that seemed almost unnatural. Her purple skin glowed faintly in the dim lights of the ship, casting an ethereal aura that only added to her mystery. Her eyes, a piercing shade of violet, never wavered as she led the way. He couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly what was going to happen next. Finally, they reached a large door at the end of the hallway. It was different from the others on the ship, more ornate, adorned with alien symbols that Alex couldn't decipher. She didn't hesitate. With a single touch of her hand, the door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a dark, expansive room beyond. The room was filled with strange machines and humming devices, each one radiating a strange energy. Alex could feel the tension in the air, like static before a storm. She stepped inside, motioning for Alex to follow. He did, though every part of him wanted to question her. Who was she, really? What was her connection to the Synthar? Was she a defect, an outcast, or was she part of something bigger, something Alex couldn't even begin to understand? The answers didn't come as quickly as he wanted, but there was no time for hesitation. The mission wasn't over, not by a long shot. The alien warrior turned toward him as he entered the room, her expression serious but not unkind. "You need to plant the virus," she said, her voice low but steady. "The Synthar's AI network is vast, and it will take everything you've got to get the virus into their central system. Once you do, I can help you get out. But first, we must take down the ship's defenses." Alex nodded, understanding the urgency in her words. "How do you know all this?" he asked, his curiosity pushing through the haze of exhaustion and confusion. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes flickered briefly toward the far side of the room, where a console stood, its screen displaying complex alien code. She didn't seem to be in a hurry, but Alex could feel the weight of her silence, like she was deciding whether to trust him with the truth. "I am part of a resistance," she finally said, her voice steady. "The Synthar are not all-powerful. They may have technology beyond your comprehension, but their AI is flawed. There are those of us who are fighting back, working in the shadows to sabotage their plans. I was sent to find you, because you are the key to our success." Alex's brow furrowed. "How am I the key?" he asked, still not fully understanding the situation. "I'm just a soldier, just another man trying to save his people." She smiled, though it was a sad smile. "That's what makes you the key. You humans, you're unpredictable. You fight not just for survival, but for what's right. The Synthar can't understand that. They rely on their algorithms, their calculations. But you, Alex Hunter, you fight with heart. And that's something the Synthar can never control." Alex was stunned by her words. He had always known that humanity was capable of incredible things, but hearing it from someone like her, someone from another world, made him feel like his people were more than just survivors. They were a force the Synthar couldn't fathom. "Look," she continued, snapping him out of his thoughts. "There's no time for more questions. The Synthar are aware of your presence now. We need to act quickly. Get to the central core and plant the virus. I'll cover you." Before Alex could respond, she stepped toward the console, typing in a series of commands. The wall in front of them shifted, revealing the hidden passage that led deeper into the ship. Alex couldn't help but admire her composure. She was a woman of few words, but every movement she made was calculated, purposeful. She was a warrior, just like him, but with skills and knowledge he could never have imagined. They moved through the passage, the air growing colder as they descended. The walls seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural energy, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every footstep echoed in the silence, each one a reminder of the danger that awaited them. Finally, they reached the heart of the Synthar mothership, an enormous chamber filled with high-tech machinery, the very core of the Synthar's power. Alex could feel the hum of the AI system resonating through the floor, a constant presence that threatened to overwhelm his senses. This was it, the moment of truth. Alex turned to the alien warrior, his heart pounding in his chest. "Where do I plant the virus?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to a massive terminal in the center of the room, its surface covered in shifting alien symbols. "There, the central hub of the Synthar's eye. Once you plant the virus, it will begin to corrupt their system. It won't destroy them, but it will give us a chance to fight back." Alex stepped forward, his mind racing as he approached the terminal. This was it. The fate of humanity, the future of his people, rested on the success of this mission. There was no turning back now. As he reached for the console, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, but it was too late. The Synthar had found them. Alex barely had time to react before the metallic hiss of the doors slamming open filled the room. His heart pounded in his chest as a group of Synthar soldiers flooded into the chamber. Their tall, imposing figures were silhouetted against the dim lights of the ship. Their helmets gleamed under the harsh illumination, their eyes hidden behind dark visors. There was no time to think, only to act. The alien warrior beside him tensed, her violet eyes narrowing as she drew her weapon, a sleek energy blade that crackled with power. She stepped in front of Alex, placing herself between him and the advancing soldiers. For a moment, her presence gave him hope, a small flicker of reassurance that maybe, just maybe, they could escape this. But the reality was harsh, and it struck like a cold wind. "Go," she ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. "Get to the console. I'll hold them off." "Don't shoot," the figure said, their voice raspy but strangely familiar. "I'm not your enemy." Alex hesitated. There was something about the voice that tugged at him, something that felt like a lifeline in the dark. "Who are you?" he demanded, his rifle still trained on the figure. "What are you doing here?" The figure stepped forward, slowly pulling back the hood to reveal a face that sent a shock of recognition through Alex's chest. The woman before him was an alien, but she wasn't like the others he had encountered. She was different, her features softer, her eyes darker, yet full of an ancient wisdom. She looked as if she had been through hell and back, her clothes torn and stained with the remnants of battle. "I am Kira," she said quietly, "and I'm here because you're the only one who can stop what's coming." Alex's mind raced as he processed the words. Who was this woman? Why did she seem to know him? And why had she called him here, to this desolate place? "Stop what?" Alex asked, lowering his weapon slightly but still cautious. "What's going on here?" Kira's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer. "The Synthar are just pawns," she said, her voice steady but filled with an unsettling urgency. "They were created to serve something much more dangerous, something far older and far more powerful." Alex's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "The Synthar were never the true threat," Kira explained. "They were merely the tools of a much darker force, one that has been manipulating events from the shadows. The virus you unleash, it wasn't just a weapon against the Synthar. It was a key." Alex's mind spun. He had thought the virus was the final blow, the end of the Synthar's reign. But now, it seemed like it was only the beginning. The virus was designed to do more than just disrupt the Synthar systems, Kira continued. "It's tied to something much greater, something that, if left unchecked, will consume not just your people, but every living thing in the galaxy." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. This was far bigger than anything he could have imagined. The stakes had just been raised. Alex's heart raced as Kira's words echoed in his mind. The stakes had never been higher. What was this force that had been manipulating everything from the shadows? And why had it chosen now when humanity had already been pushed to the brink? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden blaring of alarms, the walls of the crumbling building shaking under the force of something massive approaching. Kira's face tightened with fear, her eyes darting to the broken windows. "They found us. They'd know we're here." Alex felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who knows we're here?" "The ones who control the Synthar," Kira said, her voice low and strained. "The true enemy. They're coming." Before Alex could respond, the ground shook again, this time harder. The whole building seemed to tremble as if a colossal force was making its way towards them. Through the window, Alex saw the faint silhouette of an enormous warship descending from the sky. It was black, sleek, and monstrous, far larger than anything the Synthar had ever sent. "We need to move. Now," Kira urged, grabbing Alex's arm and pulling him toward the back exit. "They'll be here any minute." Alex followed her without hesitation, his mind spinning. The situation was spiraling out of control. The enemy they'd thought was defeated was now more dangerous than ever, and it seemed like they were out of time. As they ran through the wrecked streets of the ruined city, Alex couldn't help but wonder, how had Kira known all this? How had she known about the virus and the greater threat that lay hidden? They reached a small underground bunker, hidden beneath the crumbling buildings. Inside, a few survivors, some human, some alien, huddled together, their faces grim. It was clear that they had been preparing for something, but Alex didn't have time to ask questions. The warship above them cast an ominous shadow, and the air grew heavy with tension. "We don't have much time," Kira said, looking at the others. "The enemy is already here. We need to strike before they can fully deploy their forces." One of the humans in the bunker, a tall man with a scar running across his cheek, stepped forward. "We don't have the firepower to take them down. Our weapons won't even scratch that ship." Alex clenched his fists, frustration building inside him. He had seen what the Synthar were capable of, and he had fought against them with everything he had. But this was something else entirely. They needed a miracle. Kira's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting from Alex to the others in the room. "We don't need to fight them head-on," she said, her voice low but filled with an eerie confidence. "We need to outsmart them." "What are you suggesting?" Alex asked, skeptical but desperate. "We've been tracking them for years," Kira replied. "We know their weaknesses. We just need to get close enough to plant a virus inside their ship. A virus that will disrupt their command system and disable their entire fleet." Alex's mind raced. A virus. He'd already used one virus to fight the Synthar, but this was different. The stakes were higher, the technology far more advanced. But if Kira was right, this might be their only chance. "Do you have a plan?" Alex asked. Kira nodded. "Yes, we have a small stealth ship capable of cloaking. We'll use that to infiltrate their warship, get inside, and plant the virus. Once we do, their entire fleet will be useless. But we have to act fast." Alex looked at the survivors around him, each one worn out from years of hiding, fighting, and losing. The weight of the decision bore down on him. He knew they couldn't afford to fail. If they did, the galaxy would fall into the hands of the true enemy, and everything they had fought for would be lost. "We don't have a choice," Alex said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We do this now, or we lose everything." The group nodded, determination in their eyes. They were ready for this final fight, even if they knew it might be their last. The reality of the situation was clear. There was no second chance. Kira led them to the hidden cloaked ship, a small craft that blended seamlessly into its surroundings. It was their best shot at infiltrating the massive warship without being detected. As they climbed aboard, Alex's thoughts returned to the earlier conversation with Kira. She had said that the true enemy was not the Synthar, but something more ancient and powerful. Was this enemy some sort of AI, or something worse? "Stay focused," Kira instructed as she powered up the ship. The small vessel hummed to life, the cloaking device activating, making them invisible to any radar or detection systems. "This ship will only stay cloaked for so long. We'll have to move quickly once we're inside." Alex nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. He could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what lay ahead. The warship grew larger on the view screen as they approached, its dark silhouette looming in front of them. It was massive, bigger than anything Alex had ever seen. And they were about to infiltrate it. As they entered the ship's airspace, Alex's pulse quickened. He glanced at Kira, who was expertly piloting the ship, her face set in a determined expression. They were getting closer to their target, but as they drew nearer, the ship's defenses suddenly activated. Red warning lights flashed, and a loud alarm blared through the vessel. "They've detected us," one of the survivors shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Kira cursed under her breath. "Hold on," she yelled. The cloaking device flickered, struggling to keep them hidden. The ship's defenses began to fire, and Alex's stomach lurched as the small craft jerked and swerved to avoid incoming blasts. "We can't hold this much longer," Kira shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "We need to make a crash landing." Alex gripped his seat, adrenaline flooding his veins. There was no turning back now. This was their last stand. One final attempt to save the galaxy from the enemy that threatened to consume it. The ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of the warship. The ground was getting closer. Alex could see the faint outline of the ship's hull through the view screen. They were almost there. And then, with a deafening crash, the ship slammed into the surface of the warship. The ship shuddered violently as it crashed onto the warship's surface. The ground was unyielding, the metal beneath them giving way with a horrifying screech. For a few long moments, everything seemed to blur together. Flashes of light, the sound of metal scraping against metal, and the stinging taste of smoke filling the air. Alex's body was thrown against his seat, his vision spinning as he struggled to stay conscious. But through the chaos, one thing was clear. They had made it. They were inside. The moment the ship finally came to a halt, there was a dead silence. The crew, battered and shaken, slowly began to stir, each one of them shaken but alive. Kira was the first to regain her composure. She was already unbuckling her harness, her face determined despite the chaos that surrounded them. "Get up," she said sharply, her voice steady. "We don't have much time." Alex groaned, his head throbbing from the crash, but he nodded, pushing himself up and reaching for the emergency exit. The small ship had taken the brunt of the impact, but now their real battle began. They were on enemy territory, inside a ship that was unlike anything they had ever seen. The warship stretched out before them, vast and cold, with gleaming black walls and corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. Kira led the way, her pace swift and purposeful. She moved like someone who had been here before, someone who knew the layout of this place, despite its size. Alex followed close behind, trying to shake off the disorientation from the crash. They passed through a maze of metallic hallways, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the warship. "What exactly are we looking for?" Alex asked, trying to keep his focus sharp despite the pounding headache. "The central control room," Kira replied, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "That's where we'll plant the virus. We need to disable their systems before the fleet can launch. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to stop them." It was clear now. This was it. The fate of everything hung on the success of this mission. They didn't have the luxury of mistakes, and they didn't have time to waste. Each step forward felt like it could be their last, but there was no turning back. They had come this far. They had to finish it. As they continued through the corridors, Alex couldn't help but notice the eerie silence of the ship. No sounds of footsteps, no signs of life. It was unsettling, as though they were walking through a ghost ship. He wondered where the crew was, but the answer didn't matter. Their focus was clear: reach the control room and plant the virus. They turned a corner, and suddenly, a group of Synthar soldiers appeared at the end of the hall. Their robotic forms were imposing, their cold metal eyes locking onto Kira and Alex in an instant. The soldiers' weapons hummed to life, their energy blades glowing with deadly intent. Alex's heart raced, but Kira was already moving. She pulled out a small device from her belt and threw it at the ground. A bright flash of light erupted, blinding the Synthar soldiers. The moment their vision was compromised, Kira pulled Alex toward a side corridor, guiding him quickly through the ship's maze. "We can't fight them all," she whispered urgently. "We need to keep moving. The control room is just ahead." They pushed on, the threat of the Synthar soldiers behind them, their footsteps echoing louder as the distance between them grew. It wasn't long before they reached a large metal door, unlike any they had seen before. It was heavily fortified, with glowing symbols embedded into the walls on either side. "This is it," Kira said, her hand shaking slightly as she approached the control panel next to the door. "We can get inside, but we need to override their security." She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the panel as she bypassed the security systems. Alex kept watch, his senses heightened as every moment felt like it could be their last. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the control room beyond. It was unlike anything Alex had ever imagined. The room was filled with intricate machinery, glowing screens, and data streams running across the walls. But at the center of it all was a massive crystalline core that pulsed with an eerie energy. The heart of the warship, the command center. "This is where we plant the virus," Kira said, her voice filled with urgency. She moved toward a console on the far side of the room, plugging the small device into the terminal. "Once we upload this, the entire fleet will go offline. They won't be able to launch their attacks." Alex watched her work, his mind racing. This was it, the final moment. The warship, the Synthar, and whatever greater threat they had yet to uncover. It all rested on this small device. Kira's fingers danced across the screen, and for a brief moment, Alex wondered what lay beyond this final battle. Was this the end, or would there be something more after this? The room shuddered suddenly, the lights flickering as alarms blared to life. The Synthar soldiers had found them. "We don't have time," Kira snapped. "Get ready." Alex's heart pounded in his chest as the room's door burst open, and the Synthar soldiers flooded in, their energy blades humming menacingly. But before they could take a step forward, the console beeped. Kira had done it. The virus was uploaded. The soldiers froze for a moment, their programming failing them as their systems glitched. Kira grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him toward the exit. "Let's go," she urged, her voice full of determination. "Now." The two of them sprinted back the way they came, the warship's systems slowly falling apart around them. The soldiers were no longer a threat, their systems crashing one by one as the virus spread through the ship like wildfire. But they didn't have time to celebrate. The countdown had already begun. "We need to get back to the ship," Alex said, breathless as they made their way back toward the ship's entrance. Kira nodded, her eyes set ahead. "We're not done yet. We still need to escape before this whole place blows." The tension was palpable, the ship shaking around them as they sprinted toward the exit. The control room, the Synthar soldiers, the virus, it was all coming to an end. But there was one final obstacle. The Synthar warship's core was unstable, and they were running out of time. As they reached the ship, the warship began to tremble violently, its core rupturing as the virus did its work. Alex's pulse quickened as he and Kira dove into the ship, sealing the hatch behind them. Kira slammed her hand on the controls, and the small vessel blasted into the air, narrowly avoiding the collapsing warship as it detonated in a brilliant explosion of light. Alex exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The warship was gone, and the galaxy was safe, for now. But as he looked at Kira, he knew this was just the beginning. They had won, but there was so much more ahead of them. Whatever the true enemy was, it hadn't been defeated. But at least for now, they had a chance. A new beginning.